welcome to another episode of TPR Live. Today we're going to be talking about different types of nouns. So you probably know that a noun usually refers to a person, a place, a thing, maybe an idea or a concept. And what we're going to be looking at today is how can we classify different kinds of nouns. So before we get into that, we will begin with our warm-up as we always do. And you're going to be looking at 4 sentences. So grab a pencil, paper, pen, something to write with and write on, and mark down which of these 4 sentences seem to have errors in them. And if you can spot the error, see if you can fix it. And I'm not going to tell you how many have errors, but I will say it's more than 1. So there's your hint. So sentence 1 is, the flock of birds heading toward the tropics are majestic. Sentence 2, it's quite cold in Antarctica. Sentence 3, the swarm of bees was protecting its hive. And sentence 4, there are less trees now than there used to be. So I'll give you a few more seconds here to mark down whichever you think are incorrect, and we're going to come back to these 4 sentences at the very end to review which are correct and which are incorrect. So let's go ahead and jump into the actual content here. And we've got types of nouns. So what are our types of nouns? Well, a noun can be common or proper. It can also be concrete or abstract. And a noun can be countable or uncountable. So those are 3 different classifications, and all nouns are going to be one or the other. So then there are 2 other kinds of nouns to look at here. And some nouns are considered collective, and other ones are compound. So these are the 5 different groups of nouns that we're going to be looking at today. And as this is a live stream, if you guys have any questions while you're watching live, feel free to type in the chat box and they will come to me to be answered. So we'll start with common and proper nouns. And you've likely heard of common versus proper nouns before, but it's always good to recap. So a common noun is going to refer to some general person, place, thing, idea, concept, and so on. And typically, common nouns are lowercase. Of course, in the English language, when you begin a sentence, the first word of a sentence is going to start with a capital letter. So there's that rule. And sometimes you have different conventions, things like MLA or APA, and you might have to capitalize a noun in the title of a book or in the title of a journal, and so on and so forth. So there are reasons to capitalize nouns from time to time, but typically your common nouns are going to be lowercase. And then we've got the proper noun. So a proper noun is going to refer to a specific noun, someone, something that is specific. And you're always going to capitalize your proper nouns. So let's take a look at some common and proper nouns in context here. All right, so we could say he goes to the market once a week. Nothing's capitalized here except for the he, the first word of the sentence. That is a pronoun. And the next sentence here, he goes to the market on Sundays. So if you notice, the S in Sundays is capitalized because Sunday is a day of the week. It's a specific day of a week, and so it gets the capital letter. So any of your 7 days of the week is always going to be capitalized. Let's look at another example. So we can have, the puppy is adorable. And Ruthie, my friend's new puppy, is adorable. So you see in the second one, Ruthie is a specific puppy. Ruthie is the name of the puppy, so it gets a capital letter. So if you have the name of a person or an animal, any name of something that's a proper noun is going to get that capital letter. All right, and some nouns can actually act as a proper or common noun, depending on how they are used in a sentence. So this sentence here, the fans waited in line to meet the August author. And the next one, her favorite month is August. Well, what's the difference here? In the first one, the word August is being used as an adjective. It's a positive way of describing this author, so it doesn't get the capital letter. But in the second example, August is a month, so it's going to get a capital letter. So you see here days of the week, names, months, those are things that get capital letters because they are proper nouns. You can also have holidays and other things that are referring to a specific person or thing. All right, so the next type of noun we're going to look at is the concrete versus abstract nouns. So your concrete noun, something that you can see, touch, or somehow detect with one of your senses. So an abstract noun, something you can't see or touch or otherwise detect with your senses. So looking at some examples here. Okay, so victory. You can't touch victory. You can feel victory, but that's not something that is able to be touched. But you can touch rocks. So in this image here, the people are victorious. They're feeling something that you can't touch, so that's an abstract noun. And the rocks, you can physically touch those rocks here, so that's going to be a concrete noun. Or they, the rocks. Now we have another example, perplexity, the idea of perplexity or bewilderment, confusion, those kind of things, you can't actually touch them, but you can touch a jigsaw puzzle. So perplexity is going to be abstract and a jigsaw puzzle is concrete. You can also think of concrete as something that's tangible, and something that's tangible you can often touch. That's one way to remember it. All right. The last of those three major categories is the countable versus the uncountable nouns. So a countable noun, well, you can count it. Pretty self-explanatory. And one trick that you can use to determine whether a noun is countable is if you can put a number in front of it or the word a or an, depending on whether it starts with a consonant or a vowel, then it's probably going to be countable. And I'll show you that trick in a moment. And an uncountable noun cannot be counted. Typically, when you're dealing with uncountable, you're dealing with something that's abstract, like we just saw victory. You can't count victory, the idea of it. You could count victories in the sense of how many times you won something. You can't count perplexity. So typically it's something that's abstract or some kind of a substance or some type of liquid for your uncountable nouns. So here are some examples. Water, for example. You can't count water. You don't say, I have 7 water. You could say I have 7 bottles of water. In that case, bottles is what you're counting, not water. So water is going to be uncountable. And you see that's an example of a liquid. You can count the number of oceans. 1 ocean, 2 oceans, 3 oceans. You can say an ocean. So that's where that trick comes into play. If you were to say, can I have a water? It would be more of an informal convention if you're referring to a bottle of water, because the proper way would be, may I have a bottle of water? May I have a glass of water? And in that case, you can put the indefinite article a in front of the noun because it's not water. And those things are countable. So another thing you can't count is bliss, but you can count palm trees. So you can have 7 palm trees or a palm tree, but you can't have 7 bliss or a bliss. So again, that trick is helpful. And if you're wondering for the purposes of SAT or ACT, countable and uncountable do show up on the SAT in a sort of sneaky way. So a lot of times the way that you'll see these two things tested is through the adjectives that come before the nouns. And when you're dealing with countable nouns, you would use words like few or many in front of it, of the noun, or fewer. And when you have uncountable, a little bit, little, much. And then some words, adjectives can go in front of either countable or uncountable nouns. So a lot of, any, enough, plenty, some, and no. So let's look at an example of what I mean here. There are less or fewer people on the beach than there were yesterday. So imagine this were in the form of an SAT or ACT question, or if you're writing the sentence for school and you're just not sure which of the two it is, you want to ask yourself, okay, is the thing being modified countable or uncountable? So what's being modified here? The noun is people. So the next step is, okay, can I count people? I have one person, two people, three people. Yes, it is countable. So going up to the chart, we're going to want to use fewer because that's the one that goes with countable. So let me go ahead and highlight that here. So that is the correct response for this one. So on the SAT, ACT, you might see less versus fewer as options as your sentences are changing in the English or writing and language section of the respective test. And let's look at one more of this type of question here. So there isn't much or many gas left in the tank. So first up, what is being modified? In this case, gas is being modified. And you want to ask yourself, is that countable or is it uncountable? Okay, so gas. You say, I have a gas, I have 7 gases. If you're talking about something in science, maybe, but when we're talking about those gas in the tank, you can't count the gas. It's a liquid. So remember that rule that abstract or uncountables typically are liquids or substances or abstract. So since you can't count the gas, you're going to go for something from this middle column. And we're going to go with much. There isn't much gas left in the tank. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to type them in. And we have a couple more types of nouns to look at now. So collective nouns. These are also a really tricky type of noun that can show up in sneaky ways on your standardized tests. So a collective noun represents an entire group of things or people or something, and it's considered singular when it's in its singular form. So let's take a look at some examples. So if you're driving and you see a chain of mountains, it's one chain of mountains. So that is singular if you're only referring to one chain of mountains. But you could also see many chains of mountains because there are lots of chains of mountains around the world. And in this case, this is the plural version of a collective noun. So the noun in both of these sentences, or the subject here, chain and chains, singular, plural. And typically when you're dealing with collective nouns, when you want to pluralize the collective noun, it's going to be that first word that gets the plural ending. Also, a lot of times collective nouns are followed by the word of and some plural nouns. So you see chain of mountains. You could also see a waddle of penguins, or you could pluralize it and have waddles of penguins. There are lots of other collective nouns out there, a group of people or groups of people. You could have, trying not to give away any of my answers here, you could have a gaggle of geese, for example, would be another example of a collective noun. And what you're going to encounter on your standardized test with the collectives is subject-verb agreement. So the thing that's going to agree, if there were a sentence about a chain of mountains, the chain of mountains is beautiful versus the chain of mountains are beautiful. Well, since chain is singular, the answer would be the chain is beautiful. So that's something to watch out for. And then we have our last type of noun here, the compound noun. And a compound noun is made up of 2 or more nouns. It could also be made up of a combination of nouns and prepositions and verbs and nouns. There's different parts of speech that can be integrated into a compound noun. And a compound noun can be just one word that was created by smushing 2 words together. Or it could be 2 words connected by a hyphen or 2 separate words. Some examples of compound nouns have 3 words, and some of them have 3 words connected by hyphens. So there's a lot of different variations, but it's basically several things were put together to form one noun. So some examples here. You can paint a range of mountains, and there'd be an S there, so we'll just write one in with a paint. And range is another example of a collective. It's like a chain of mountains, it's another word, a synonym. But the paintbrush in this case is the compound noun because we've got paint and we've got brush smushed together to create paintbrush. And you can also go camping in the mountains under a full moon. So full moon here is an example of a compound noun. And in this case, it's two words that are separated, but it's just one thing. And full is not being used as an adjective here. The actual word is full moon. Okay. So now it's your turn to kind of go through and start to categorize some different kinds of nouns. So if you have any questions, now is a good time to ask them. And we will start to go through each of these nouns and determine whether each is common or proper, concrete or abstract, countable or uncountable, and if they are collective or compound. So for the first one here, we have the word frog. So asking yourself, okay, is frog common or proper? Is it a specific frog? Does it have a name? It's capitalized because I capitalized everything on this column. So don't let the capitalization fool you. A frog is just a typical general animal. It's not a specific type or anything. So this is going to be common. And is it concrete or abstract? Can you touch a frog? Can you see a frog? And the answer is yes. So since you can, it's going to be concrete. And the next, is it countable or uncountable? So can you count frogs? Can you say one frog, two frog, three frogs? Yeah, you can. So that means it's also countable. And the next one, collective, is it collective? In this case, no, it's not referring to a group of anything. So you can just write nope. Compound, well, it's only one word. So the answer is no, it's not compound. So our next noun here, happiness. Is that common or proper? It's not a specific anything, right? So it's just going to be common. Concrete or abstract? Can you touch happiness? Can you see happiness? No, you can't. So that means that it is abstract. Can you count happiness? You can't count happiness. And again, remember, a lot of the uncountable nouns are abstract. So this is going to be uncountable. It is not collective. It's not referring to a group of things. And it's not compound. It's just one word. Okay, so if you look at something like Oval Office, now we have something that's specific. It's not office, it's the Oval Office. So this is going to be proper. And you would want to capitalize each of the words, oval and office. Is it concrete or abstract? Well, it's concrete. You can be there, you can physically touch it. But you're not going to be able to count it because there's only one. So you can't count. It's not collective, right? Because they're not referring to multiple things. And it's not compound either. It's just two words that are describing the one place, the Oval Office. There aren't multiple Oval Offices. You can have oval-shaped offices, but when you're talking about the one in the White House, it's just one specific one. Okay, and then music, common or proper, or sorry, backtrack, toothbrush, common or proper. You can have a toothbrush that's made out of plastic or wood or anything. It's just a toothbrush. We don't have a specific one. It's not a brand. So this is going to be common. You can definitely touch a toothbrush. So it's concrete. And you can count toothbrushes. You can have multiple. So it's countable. It's only referring to one. So it's not collective. But it is compound. So we finally have a compound word here. And that's because the word tooth and the word brush are added together to form toothbrush. And next here, music, So common or proper, is it a specific type that is referring to something by name? No, so it's just going to be common. But can you touch music? You can actually touch it. So it's going to be an abstract. And can you count music? The concept of music. You can't count the concept of music. So it's uncountable. And it is not collective because you're only referring to the one thing. And it's not compound. It's not made up of two or more words. All right. Next one here, we have Samantha. And that is a name. So if you remember, names are going to get that capital letter because they are proper. Samantha is a person, so she's concrete. But you can't count Samantha. Samantha is one specific person. So it's going to be uncountable. And not collective, it's not a group of something. And it's not compound either. So the next one, teachers. It's not proper, right? It's going to be common. And teachers are concrete people, entities, things that can be seen and touched. So that's going to be common. You can count them. You can have multiple teachers, and it's in the plural form. But it's not collective because it's not the name of a group of teachers. It's just the plural noun. And it's not compound either. All right. Last one is herd. So if you have a herd of cattle, for example, that is going to be common. It's not referring to something specific. It's going to be concrete because you can see and touch them. You can count herds. There can be more than one herd. You can have 2 or 3, 4, 400, however many. It is collective. So this is our only collective one on the list here, because a herd is referring to more than one herd of cattle. And it is not compound. Okay. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and type them in now. We're going to now return to the warm-up and look at those 4 sentences again and see if you got the correct answer. And maybe you didn't the first time, but maybe you changed your answer since we started today. So just turning my slides here. Great, thank you. All right, which sentences have errors? So number 1, the flock of birds heading toward the tropics are majestic. So all of these sentences, all of the 4 have, or each of the 4 has something in it that ties into what we just went over. So in this case, what ties is the word flock. And a flock is collective. So flock is the subject of the sentence. And flock in this case is singular, even though it's referring to multiple birds, singular noun. So we would need to say the flock of birds heading toward the tropics is majestic, not are majestic. So number 1 is not correct. Save. I'm just going to type this in here. Okay. And number 2, it's quite cold in America. Is there anything wrong with that one? If so, what is wrong with it? There's something pretty wrong with it. You are missing a capital letter. This word here, Antarctica, is a proper noun. It's a continent. It's a specific continent, so it's going to have a capital A. And I can cover up that row too. So the swarm of bees is protecting its hive. We have here another collective noun, swarm of bees. Was, swarm was that agrees, singular, singular, and then its hive is singular. Sounds kind of funny, because you're thinking all of these B's and I, but since the noun is like it's got so this is correct. That's nice. And the last one, let's try out what are we being tested on here? The countable versus uncountable. We have less trees. So remember to figure out where you want to use less or fewer. Ask yourself, is the phrase modified or uncountable? And what's being modified? Here's the word trees. Definitely count trees. There are trees. I mean, many trees, but there are things that can be counted. Therefore, this is going to be incorrect because we need to say there are fewer trees now than there used. Okay, and that is it. So good job everybody who got this correct from the beginning, or you figured it out partway through. These little goals seem a little bit, but when you start to sort of understand different kinds of taking will improve when you know the grammatical kind of questions, and it'll just be overall a better writer when you understand the little nuance details. So thank you all for tuning in today, and I will see you next time.